And they're not sitting still. They have already taken delivery of all of these autonomous factory floor robots that will carry the vehicle through its assembly line process, and they've been posting updates from CPC Group in Italy showing the giant metal pieces that are going to stamp out the body composites of the APTERA. So I guess what annoys me is like
It annoys me that I have to do this again, and probably one more time after this. Well, about those AGVs. It was more than a year ago they said they were getting about 50 of them. They said they'd need around 50 so that the production line would run smoothly. They had 12 workstations, but they needed about 50 AGVs to have a proper production line running through those workstations. Now they show a photo of only 12 AGVs turn up at Carlsbad. There are roughly 38 missing. The reason why they bought a dozen to photograph was so that they could bait people again, the gullible, with appearance of looking like they're getting somewhere, getting closer to production. But they didn't like the idea of buying the 50 that they needed for production, so they bought a dozen, fits nicely into a photo, and so that they can sell them once the asset sale occurs, they keep them on the pallets and keep them wrapped up. That way they'll get top dollar for them. In fact, they waited until the Californian taxpayer could pay about half of the cost of 12. So pretty much half a dozen of those 12 AGVs were free. And if they can get 50% of their value, they'll get their money back when it comes to auction.
So I guess what annoys me is like I've been following EV startups for a while. I can smell scams, okay? I can tell when a company doesn't actually have much concrete like actual plans or like real investment going on. They're not actually buying equipment or mass production. And what amazes me about APTERA more than any of those others is the fact that they haven't IPO'd and been listed on the stock exchange so that they can try to get a bunch of people to buy in. But of course they're a startup, so they still need investors, but they're trying to do it in a more responsible, ethical way while simultaneously being as transparent as possible.
The reason why I chose APTERA as a topic for practice, and I'm now surprised that I need so much more practice, and APTERA is providing it for me in spades. But the reason why I chose APTERA was because I can smell scams, and contrary to this guy's abilities, I smell a scam. And I have done since the first APTERA video I saw nearly 2 years ago. I can see a scam that brings in, and I'm not sure what the real figure is, but somewhere in the ballpark of $180 million in total so far. And with those sorts of millions, it's not hard to make 5 prototypes and buy a dozen AGVs and even spend a bit of money on some wasted steel molds. The money they spend is well worth the output when you consider the money they raise. And so this point that they're making rather large spendings is not a reason to think that they're genuine. I can tell when people lie. And I have, in a lot of my videos, pointed out direct lies from the CEOs Chris Anthony and Steve Fambro. You can go back to a 2009 video, not long before they left, and you'll see Steve Fambro saying they are ready to produce. Yet 2 years later, they didn't produce, they folded. Some may say that that's a turn of bad luck, but you need to be able to believe what people say. And ready to produce means ready to produce in every aspect. If they didn't have the money when he opened his mouth, he should have said so.
Very big YouTuber, and yet the CEO of APTERA and their chief of design was willing to come on my channel, and they've been willing to come on channels that are much, much smaller. Saving Green got to do an interview with Chris Anthony and a factory tour, and he just has barely over 1,000 subscribers, and they've had statements issued, and their chief of design and their CEO come on APTERA Owners Club channel several times. He just has a little over 10,000 subscribers. Have you seen the CEOs or chief of staff come onto YouTube channels and answer any questions?
This claim to being open and transparent is nothing but hogwash. I base it on what happened to me early on in the piece. I asked a question and I got an email back. This is on the comment section on the very short APTERA Motors suite of videos. I got this comment back saying, "You're welcome to ask any question and we'll happily answer it." So I asked about the skin cooling. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, I don't believe it works. Can you explain how it works properly? Well, not only did I not get an answer, I got blocked. And I have been blocked from most APTERA sites. There's only a couple that allow me to make comments. And blocking is just gutter tactics. But to be blocked by APTERA Motors, who claims to be open and transparent, tells me that they're snake oil salesmen. It tells me that they got something to hide.
I will mention that when I got to interview APTERA's CEO, there was no preface. They did not say, you're not allowed to ask about this, you're not allowed to talk about this. There was no contract that said I had to ask certain questions, which is what I know other EV startups have done because they're a public company and because they're listed on the stock exchange. They're like, oh, don't ask about this, or I can't comment about this. No, they listen to their community. They incorporate things that we ask for, like the DC fast charging, and they're willing.
The reason why they don't make any conditions, as far as I can tell, is because the people who come and visit are as thick as thieves, and APTERA doesn't need to bother with setting conditions on the interviews. There's one person called N. Bruce Nelson who has a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. Of course, he had to ask for it, but they wouldn't talk about the skin cooling unless he signed an NDA. A crazy person asked for it, but still they went along and made him stick to the non-disclosure agreement to this day. The reason why CEOs of established companies don't do the things that APTERA does with small players is because they get their finances from bona fide sources. If they were getting their finances from crowdfunding, they would behave like APTERA pretends to behave.
To talk to us and give us real answers when we have questions about pricing or the composites or the build timelines. And I think Chris has been incredibly transparent in saying, like, yeah, the most frustrating thing about this is we have this incredible product, that is safe, efficient, and affordable, and we're trying to get it to market, and people don't want to invest in us,
They've been burnt once before, properly burnt. While $500 pre-orders were refunded because it was the law, the major investors lost millions. Money doesn't grow on trees, and they had spent millions of dollars on a few prototypes. I think there were about 17 partly built shells and things when they went to sell their assets, but there was almost nothing in total value in all of those assets, yet they'd eaten up millions of dollars. I think it's because they had succeeded so well in putting up a fake prototype in the first place and getting so many millions of dollars from big investors that went missing, you might say, and the stock prices to investors proportionately went down, that they decided it's worth another hand in the cookie jar, and they're running a very similar operation this time as they did last time.
We're trying to seek big whale investors so that we can get production started, and we could build more prototypes to do more flashy things, which is ironic because I see a lot of people in the APTERA community say, oh, why don't you build more Delta prototypes, or why don't you do more crash testing or more range testing? And yet APTERA's like, we could do that, but we don't want to because
it's not the skeptics that are saying build more prototypes, it's the pro-APTERA people that are saying that. And they're saying it because they want prototypes that can show what APTERA is supposed to do. And they're sick of seeing the fake prototypes that don't show what APTERA can do at all. We don't even know whether any prototype, excluding the Beta that has a radiator, we don't know that any prototype can go more than 5 miles without at least stopping to cool for 20 minutes. Or can go 5 miles without running out of battery, when 250 miles is the lowest claimed distance they can go. Most of the prototypes can't get out of a car park, and the Beta is used to get around the block, so it's very suspicious. They're not open and honest, they are hiding things.
We want to use that money that it would take to build those prototypes on actually getting the vehicle into production. They actually don't care about how much it may boost their street credibility, or, releasing prototypes would probably help their stock price if they were publicly listed, because that would make them look good in the press. See, we have real prototypes. See, it's finalized. Let's let more and more YouTubers check out our Delta prototypes, or let's do more range testing and that kind of thing. No, they care more about using those resources towards getting the vehicle into production, even if
it doesn't look like they're using too many resources to get into production. Carlsbad is a place where they can store old stuff that they're not even using now. The solar plant has been abandoned and the equipment has been stored at Carlsbad. There's very little of anything stored at Carlsbad. They don't have a stockpile of Alefi motors. They don't have a stockpile of Yazuki wiring harnesses. They don't have a stockpile of seats or of wheels or of Roche suspension parts. They have no stockpiles of anything. They took the photos of a dozen AGVs only after the California taxpayer paid for half of them. They have basically an empty plant for most of the floor space at Carlsbad. They are not looking like gearing up for production at all. They're looking like they're just baiting people with props, with relatively inexpensive props compared to the amount of money they're dragging in. And it will stop. And it will stop in the manner that they actually are looking forward to. It will stop when they say, oh yes, we've spent more than we're getting in, and so we can't afford to continue. And money will be the reason why, or lack of money is the reason why, again, we failed. But to me, I'm banking on it being a deliberate fail, and it was a deliberate fail the first time round. Both times, their prototypes did not work, and they never proved to work. And I believe this could have been known to the CEOs in the first instance, and they have pulled the wool over everyone's eyes.
It makes them look worse in the short term. I admire that. I respect that. And there's definitely some scam companies out there, but I'm just trying to tell you now, APTERA is not one of them. And that's not me trying to say that they're guaranteed to succeed. They're guaranteed to make it to market. That's not true. There's some risks involved here. It's a startup, of course, and there's definitely a chance that they won't make it. My point is, if they don't make it, it's going to be because of lack of investment and lack of federal government support. It's not going to be because not enough people were in.
Yes, it's good to have a scapegoat. Lack of money, lack of federal government support, just like last time. Well, the fact remains there has never been a prototype that does what they claim it can do. Never been a prototype. Get that through your heads. Never been a prototype that does what they claim it can do. And that's a crucial piece of information for determining whether there's a likely scam or not. If they had something that worked, then you could say, oh yes, it was only lack of money that prevented them from producing. But they have never had something that works. And if they fold, I just hope the authorities really investigate how much the prototypes fall below the claimed performances. They use computer design as a reason to make these claims, and at present they say they're inside 5% of their claims. If the authorities find they're not within 50% of their claims, then that's snake oil in and of itself. That's deception. They've been saying that now that we're starting to validate, we are within 5% of our computer diagnostics. That should be the benchmark for whether they're lying or not.
Interested in the vehicle. It's not going to be because they're a scam or failed to execute. APTERA's team, in my opinion, is far more passionate than any other startup because they tried this back in the day. The early APTERA prototypes back in 2008 had a very similar concept of just making the most aerodynamic, efficient vehicle possible, and they couldn't get the funding they needed, and they sold out too much of the company to investors and leadership that tried to take the brand in a different direction, and it was poor leadership, and it bankrupted the brand, and most people would just take the L there. The company went under and they died. And most people would just say, okay, that sucks, we failed, moving on. And Chris and Steve did do amazing things after that, but they realized, no, this is important. We care about making a sustainable future, and we want to make a self-powered vehicle because we don't see other brands doing it. So
if you watch Jay Leno's second test ride of an APTERA and listen to his question about what happened last time, you will hear Chris Anthony and Steve Fambro put to Jay this idea that they lost interest, that they lost what you might say is the passion, and they wanted to do other things, and so they walked. This is their story from their mouth. They lost interest in APTERA, and they were more interested in things like growing vegetables in Saudi Arabia, or making boat hulls or batteries for forklift trucks and other things. They lost interest in APTERA. It's also interesting to note that between 2011 and 2019, nobody had enough interest in APTERA, not even the people that owned the intellectual property. Nobody had interest in APTERA for 8 years. If there's any interest after 2019, it's interest in doing the same thing, putting up a fake prototype, or a few of them, and raising money. I believe that the changes to crowdfunding laws made it easier for them to raise money. I have no idea how American crowdfunding laws operate or what the changes were, but it just appears like that was a trigger for them to get an interest back. But the interest is not in the product, it's in the crowdfunding.
They bought the IP again after failing initially. They know everybody saw that story unfold, and they know that that was very public and it didn't work. And yet they chose to reuse that branding, reuse that name, APTERA, and said, we want to try this again. We are passionate about this and we want it to succeed. So we're going to...
They know that failure is part of the plan, so they're not afraid of failure.
Going to try as hard as we can to get this thing to market. So please don't just go blindly calling any brand that has decent specs a scam without doing due diligence on how transparent the brand is, how hard the brand has worked. And basically what I've seen is there are people that are excited and believe in APTERA, that they're trying their best, not necessarily that they're going to succeed, but their intentions are genuine. And there's people who don't know about APTERA, that haven't researched them fully and don't know what they're doing, so they call them a scam. And because
this premise that the ones who are calling it a scam are the ones who don't know anything and haven't researched is rubbish. The people who blindly follow APTERA and everything they say are the ones that can think the least. They're the ones that don't know a lot of things. They don't know, as far as I can tell, I'm not sure they know how to tie their shoelaces by themselves. They are so gullible that they actually think that everything the CEOs claim are true. And it's that crazy that the skin cooling is supposed to be the big feature that allows this thing to be usable, and yet all they get to prove it is at first a cartoon that was obviously flawed and showed that it couldn't work, and then Wingnut showing the cretin from AOC a test bed that said this proves that on the computer they can tell APTERA can run through Death Valley without a problem, and yet on the test bed it was obvious that it didn't work. I urge people to watch my videos that are all about the skin cooling.
Because you haven't done your research and because you're confused by the brand, you just assume, oh, well, I don't know what they're doing, so they must be a scam. You're scaring away potential investors that could help make this brand a reality. And
people who provide an opposite opinion ought to be able to provide that balanced viewpoint. It doesn't matter whether it scares away or not. People need to know both sides of the coin. And to prevent people with opposing views from voicing them is unethical.
even if it doesn't work out, I think APTERA has still done incredible things, like push so hard for the NAC standard to be adopted that originally started with them, and then Tesla opened it, and now these automakers are jumping on board with it. But that originally was kickstarted through APTERA pushing Congress to make the North America charging standard the default port. So even if APTERA goes under, we still owe them a lot of credit for that. And in more recent interviews, APTERA has said that they're considering commercializing their solar roof technology that they've put on their vehicles, and even selling out their battery module tech, because they have supply chains already in place for that. And there's some smaller players that are looking to buy battery modules that they can't mass produce themselves. So APTERA is already looking at ways so that they can start commercializing their initial IP and hopefully use that money to help start production of their three-wheeler vehicle and ramp up to high volume. So I think they're being really, really wise. Essentially, if I could start a company today, I would do.
Will APTERA make any money from selling the solar? Probably not. And if they do, will they pay back anybody who invested in APTERA from their money made from the solar? Probably not. Will they make any money from this battery tech when we've never even seen what battery tech they've got? Probably not. And will they pay back people who have invested in APTERA if they manage to make money from battery tech? My assumption is not in a million years. They will not be doing this. All of this, we can sell our intellectual property, is hogwash. If you look at the patents they've got, I would say none, but they actually, I think, got a patent for turning solar cells 45 degrees, which is a joke, an absolute joke. That's the only patent that I know of, is we can turn our cells 45 degrees so nobody else can't. It's unbelievable.
Do everything that they're already doing. But don't put them in the same boat as your Nikola's or your Alpha Motors or those companies that just come out with renders randomly on a website and say, see, here's our EV. No, APTERA is a heck of a lot more real than those guys. And that's why, whether they fail or succeed, I will continue fighting for them, because to me, it's much more than a brand.
If you've got a product to sell, you've got something real. If you've got 5 fake prototypes, you don't have anything real. If you can't prove that the fake prototypes can do anywhere near what they are claiming to do, you've got advertising deception. This guy has a warped idea on reality. In all of the things that I say in all of my videos about APTERA, I say I deal in facts and I deal in reality. And this is why I am prepared to stick my neck out and say it's 98% likely to fold. And it's always been my suspicion that that was the plan from the beginning. And I mean from 2005, as early as 2005. It's the plan to put something fake up and then run away with the money and have it disappear into places nobody can find. And I believe they knew how to do it last time and they're doing it again. Nobody batted an eyelid when the chief financial officer resigned, and nobody batted an eyelid when Chris Anthony took over as chief financial officer. This is not right.
Way of designing a product with efficiency first, and if they don't make it, then I hope they can at least prove to another big brand, whether it's Tesla or Ford or Rivian or GM, that there should be vehicles like this. There should be a hyper aerodynamic vehicle with an emphasis on safety and a composite build and solar charging so that it doesn't need to be plugged in. I just want the product to exist. I don't really care who makes it, and right now APTERA is the closest at making this product a reality, so that's why I'm going to support them.